Today is a big deal. Man, it's a solo episode day, but I'm doing episode number 500, which is wild to think that I've done 500 of these. And so I want to make this one extra special. And I'm going to talk about some of the most important things that I've learned, in 500 of these, but also just through my experience of creating online and sharing and teaching and living my transformation very much out loud. I often think that my son is going to be able to listen to this podcast and hear the evolution of his father and his mother, because, she's in quite a bit of it, and just hear both the humanity in me and the struggle and the desire to always restore integrity and to live what I say. And I think in a time where there are so many people we hold on pedestals, that saying, to kill your gurus, I think that's a great idea. Because we live in a time where we're so let down by people in positions of power who present themselves as being one way and then acting another. And I think that is such a great rudder or fulcrum or reference point for our own integrity, that if we are going to teach something, we should be that. Because I think otherwise it's just consuming. Like, if you know that an expose could be written on you or someone could tell the truth about who you really are, you won't sleep well. No amount of green juice will restore a lack of integrity. And so for me, that's been an ongoing lesson, that my body is at peace when I am in alignment. And when I'm not, can I honor that I'm not and move towards it? Because of course you're not always going to be in alignment. And of course you're going to make bad decisions. And of course you might do things that you're incredibly ashamed of. But can you go through the process of restoring? Because the information, the shame, the pain, the whatever it is an opportunity for you to figure out the way back home, right? You learn deeper layers of who you are as a person and what your values are and what you stand for. And that's a big deal. I think as a man, there's a lot of responsibility, the right kind of responsibility, the kind that I don't want to get rid of, that is in being a good father, that is in holding bars of integrity, that is not having or using the exploitation of power. And that's why it's so important that we explore the deepest parts of our own shadow, because we are all capable of awful things. And I always think of the book Free Will from Sam Harris, where it starts with a really disturbing story. And he says, if we traded cell for cell, experience for experience with that person who committed that crime, we would all commit that crime. And I think that's a really important way of seeing the world, that we tend to project our own free will, the idea of what we're capable of choosing, onto other people, like looking at a heroin addict and going, why don't you just get a job? Not knowing what they've been through that's led to that moment. And so it is, in my opinion, our deepest duty to our own being to live in the integrity of what we know. Because goddamn, you sleep better. Everything's better. You're less hooked into by addictive things. You just feel good. That's it. At the end of the day, you don't want to do drugs because you don't want to leave your center. Like, you don't want to change your state unless it's, going to figure out what's going on in the universe and other dimensions. Look, say no to drugs if you want to say no to drugs. And I do like the odd psychedelic for exploration of my own development and healing. And there's episodes on that. So with that said, I'm going to go through the top things that I've learned. The first one, study the masters. I've had the opportunity to speak to some of the best and the best and the best in the world. And it's been absolutely unbelievable. Like, conversations that have shifted me, awarenesses that have changed something within me. And I hope that you've gotten that through the journey of the podcast too. And that has been, one, an absolute honor, because people that I first started studying before I even started a podcast or my Instagram, I've shared microphones with and rooms with and conversations and stages. You never know where the thing that hurt you is going to bring you. Like, think, all of this is created from an engagement that I was confused about. And I thought it was the end. And little do you know, it is always the beginning of something. And that trusting that, I'll get more into that in a bit, but trusting that is wild. And look, On your journey of studying the masters, allow yourself to also become one. Now, with that said, there's a great saying from, I heard Ram Dass say it, that he who knows does not speak and he who speaks does not know. So I recognize the irony in me speaking right now. But that we must always maintain this level of humility, of being able to listen, right? And I think about that saying in the context of when we can allow for quiet time, when we can allow for space to listen, not just to people, but to the earth, to the birds, to the trees, to our own inner being. And humility is probably the most important quality. I think relationally, the research shows kindness, generosity. Those are obviously very important. But curiosity and humility, I think, are really need to be emphasized as probably the most important for creating epic relationships, because curiosity allows you to, in your own trigger, in your own experience, still see wisdom in someone else's experience. Still be curious about, am I responding in a way that's appropriate to this? Can I grow? Can I change? What am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? You notice if you meet everything with curiosity, it doesn't negate that you might need to take action in a certain direction. It doesn't mean you can't be upset. You're just checking in, and that space between what you experience and what you respond with will completely change your life. And so developing the skills to master how to build more time in that space and more capacity. In nervous system talk, we would say build your window of tolerance. So build your capacity to hold this friction and then choose the direction that is actually most productive for you in your life and what you want to do with it. And so humility, man, like just be ready to know that your shit isn't always clean, right? Like your poop's not always in a group, and that sometimes it's you, right? And sometimes it's them, but sometimes it's you, and sometimes it's both. And so with all that said, it's like practice, get in the reps. I've had so many conversations. Like before I was even doing a podcast, as a pharmaceutical rep, when I did sales in Future Shop, which was the original Best Buy in Canada, I had thousands and thousands and thousands of conversations on how to building rapport in real time. I put in the reps, and those reps just keep getting developed. It's like before I could ever get invited to speak on a stage, I built the stage. I would build the events because I was like, I'm not waiting. I'm going to create experiences. I'm going to talk at yoga studios. So it's like putting in the reps, get the reps in. You can't just expect yourself to be excellent at something. Being bad at it is the price of admission. It's like, it's such an important thing to recognize that the struggle is the path. Because think of like when a kid is learning to walk, and my son, man, he would face plant, he would do all that stuff. He'd get right back up like he was Usain Bolt. Think about us, we lose that. We lose that often because we're afraid of what people think about our failures. We also correlate our failures with self-worth. But your worth is not correlated to your failures, your worth just is. But your ability to continue to show up towards the thing that you want to create and you love, that is actually really important. That's a big deal because that's who you witness yourself being. When most people quit, you're not quitting. You continue going. So that's that one. Study the masters, allow yourself to become one. As my friend Sherry Salata said when I said to her, everybody, she was the producer of Oprah, like what's the one thing that is true about all these great teachers, other than a lot of them are on the Epstein list? What is one thing that is true about all the best teachers? And she said, that you don't need them. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. She's like, actually, let me correct that. You need them to remind you that you don't need them. That's it, right? All the teachers worth their weight, as Terence McKenna said, are the ones that remind you of the power, right? Remind you of your power, that you're the authority over your life, that you can figure it out. You're not helpless. And you need community, yes, but you are powerful. You can create everything you desire. That's why I named it Create the Love. It was actually supposed to be Create the Love You Want, but then there wasn't enough space in the Instagram username, so I just made it Create the Love. So isn't that funny? That's how it all began. Okay, so the second one, let yourself change. Oh man, let yourself be dissatisfied with your life. I'm reading these because I didn't want to miss them. Let yourself change. Let yourself be dissatisfied with your life. Let yourself want more or different. Let yourself and life evolve. This was really hard for me, and this has been a struggle that is documented in my podcast, is really letting what wants to come through me, and letting go of old identities of what I'm supposed to talk about and what my quote unquote expertise is in, etc. Allowing yourself to evolve is such a graceful thing because you're not always going to want the relationship I don't want the relationship that I had in grade 9. I mean, it was so bad. And that was largely due to me, that I couldn't talk. I couldn't communicate. My relationship in grade 11, 12, I was a good partner, but I was so codependent. I was such a people pleaser. I avoided conflict. Like, I don't want that relationship. Thank God we keep evolving. I don't want to be the guy I was when I was 22 and heartbroken and, trying to have short-term relationships, or even the guy after the engagement ended who tried to go back to old ways. And, what do they say? That old ways won't open new doors, and it did. It just got me back in the same cycles. So it is a sign of your evolution that you're no longer satisfied with your life. Good. That's good. And it is a sign that you're growing and that you're changing. So let yourself evolve. Let yourself change. Be gentle with yourself. Let the information of your dissatisfaction actually speak to what you truly desire. Now, the truth about the universe is that it's always, like, evolution dictates this. The truth about the universe is that it's always trying to make you better. Even through life's hardest circumstances, we are trying to become better as a species, as all the species that live around us. We're all trying to become more efficient and more effective, and trying to become more loving and more powerful. And powerful not in a bad way, but in a way where we actually support and love one another. And so allowing yourself to really embrace that what is occurring in your life is inviting your transformation. That is not minimizing the pain of what is occurring in your life. Because look, the truth is that the world is effed. And it's always been kind of effed because humans are in charge of humans. And that's a problem, because if humans don't do the work that you and I do, especially in the exploration of the things like relationship and our own inner shadow, then that power just amplifies who people really are. Just like money just amplifies who people really are. Rich people aren't bad. Bad people who are rich are bad. Just like, poor people who are bad are still not nice people. So it's more about the amplification that money does when we have unresolved stuff, just like what power does when we have unresolved stuff. And look, I think the next one is that evolving out loud is really hard. Like, actually living my whole transformation out loud has been hard. But I do feel like it's part of the process of my own growth. It's also part of, like, I want to grow out loud because what originally began my work was wanting people not to feel like they're broken because their relationship ended. That it's human and normal to struggle, and it's also normal to not want a relationship, and it's normal to want one that you can't have, right? Like, there's so many aspects to this that are important. But I want you to honor that if you do any social media sharing or have a podcast or YouTube, or you're someone who teaches, evolving out loud is hard. There's an accountability to evolving out loud. But there's also a lot of judgment. There's a lot of stuff that gets projected on you. Really, when I think of the early part of my writing, I was really excising a lot of shame that I had. Like, here's something that I did, and I'm not proud of it, but here's what I learned from it. And the whole idea was that I could take these things that I didn't want people to know, and I could write about what I learned about them, so it discharged the fear I had. But man, like, COVID really taught me that, though, that the evolution, when it's really not safe from a cultural or like a main held sort of narrative perspective, sometimes you gotta adjust the line between privacy and transparency. So that's been big for me. The next one is that people pleasing really leaked into my business. So codependency, my wife and I wrote a book on it called Liberated Love. And as I healed codependency individually, I saw that I was starting to be challenged with it collectively. Like, was I willing to hold my truth in the context of speaking out on social media about something and facing a barrage? Like, could I be me and let other people be them and experience my emotional experience of that and them experience theirs of me, but me not deviate from my center? But what I found was, yes, that absolutely was influencing me in sharing things, because what would happen is I would share from an angry place because I would repress my self-expression, or I would share from a resentful place because I had suppressed myself. Instead of being fluidly open, I would go from being plugged up to being, right? It's like how boundaries, there's porous boundaries that allow too much, and then there's healthy boundaries that you're connected to other people, but you feel protected too. And then there's rigid boundaries where you like plug it all up, right? But that's like a pressure cooker. Eventually it pops. And so we have to find a third way that's not the suppress everything and not the express everything, that there is a wise holder of communication that lives between those. And that's the third way. And I've been learning that. But it leaked into my business because when my business really blew up in 2020-ish, 2021, I had a big team. Oh my God, the overhead was insane. And I really was feeling like I was just working to pay bills and salaries. And it was overwhelming because if I wasn't creating, people weren't getting paid. Like the business would basically go bankrupt because I didn't have a diversified model. I didn't have someone else creating. I didn't have someone else making money. And I had a really high overhead. But I had one team member who was actually quite toxic, who had unresolved stuff from traumatic childhood with their mom. And a lot of that sort of edginess, that reactivity, I was afraid of conflict, afraid of really like having hard conversations. And I could feel in my own nervous system the sort of edge of their nervous system. And I allowed that behavior to infiltrate my team. And when it infiltrated my team, that was my responsibility. I'm responsible for the collective nervous system of my organization, of my team, of the people I lead. Now, I had this whole idea that I would have a company that had no hierarchy, but you then realize that some people need direction and some people like giving direction. And so that, in a way, sort of was this idealized idea of how a company could be structured, but it didn't work. It wasn't right. And I think that was just because I was afraid of people experiencing discomfort from being led. But it's my vision. I have to lead my vision. And the other thing is I left my employees in the crossfire of, because of my fear of conflict, I allowed, they suffered. And eventually, like the pressure cooker, I did pop, not in an angry or mean way, but I was like, I just can't do this anymore. But I should have not done it months before. And so it just shows you that any time you betray yourself, you will face the consequences of a life created from that. And I keep coming back to that lesson time and time again. And it's a powerful lesson, but man, is it ever a painful, it's a painful lesson. So yeah, I should have protected my team. And I think it also leaked into the podcast because I started to say yes to guests that were maybe not fully aligned, or I said yes to people that I didn't really feel had an exceptional thing to teach. Like I lowered the standard of the podcast to accommodate them. So I want to apologize for that, because in my own journey of really holding a high bar for myself, of stepping into a level of exceptionalism, I should have kept holding that for you, for what you were listening to, for what you were taking in. And by the codependency of not saying no to people, I lowered a standard to accommodate feelings. I was afraid of people being rejected. But in doing that, I actually brought down the whole value of this podcast. So I will not do that ever again. I give you my word. And that, I think, is maybe one of the most important lessons of 500 episodes, is that you're listening to this or you're watching this because you desire to be exceptional. You are someone who is always striving for that. That's different than perfectionism, which is sourced from, if I am finally enough, you'll love me. This is like, I love me, and so I'm constantly in the pursuit of living the highest level of knowledge that I hold. That's massive. What a standard that is. But don't you dare lower that standard to accommodate others, because everyone will suffer. It doesn't mean you don't accommodate or compromise and love people who are learning and changing. It's just Are they learning and changing? If they're not changing, then they're not meeting your standard, which is when you learn something, you integrate it, you change, you go learn what you need to learn to become better at that thing. That's essential for beautiful, loving, amazing relationships. And the last thing I want to say is that in the act of restoring the integrity with you, the listener, the watcher, of saying, I'm not going to let codependency dictate who I have on the show or any of that. And at the very, maybe first year of the podcast, I said that I was going to have my ex-girlfriends on and do an ex-girlfriend series. But then COVID happened, and that got in the way of a lot of the conversations I actually wanted to have. And I couldn't sit down with them anymore. And then time passed and life happened. And I never had the series. And I reached back out to a few of the women that I dated in my life to ask if they were interested in coming on the podcast so I could restore integrity with you. And it feels like the ship has sailed in that convo. One of them was like, I'm not really interested, but I really appreciate you asking. And so I say all that because, one, I wanted to acknowledge that I never did that thing that I said I was going to do. Two, it doesn't feel relevant anymore. It doesn't feel, if I did it now, it would feel contrived. And so my journey moving forward is to constantly be open with you about what I say, and if I'm keeping my word with that. If I'm not, what is the adjustment? Why haven't I done the thing? And the other thing is, I'm just so grateful that I get to do this, that I get to have this conversation with you. And thank you for allowing me to evolve out loud. Thank you for staying with me as I went through changes and will continue to. And my promise to you is that I'm always going to share the greatest learnings that I'm having in my life at the time, because this is one of the ways in which I process, and it seems to be helpful for other people to process where they're at. So I hope that you garnered a lot of lessons from this episode. And if there's one major thing to take away, is how do you restore integrity with where you may have left it? And how do you really reach for that standard that is going to give you the great life that you desire? You have to live that standard, but then it's not unloving to hold that standard for other people. Just make sure you're holding it for yourself and then holding it for others, because that is actually the invitation for them to become their best selves. So with all that said, much love. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can stay together with me for another 500, and have a beautiful day. Talk soon.